Karl, what are we shooting?
Fireflies!
Look at them. I don't know if you guys can see the glowing specks. Holy moly, there are hundreds and thousands of them here in the woods.
Okay guys, so we're excited to share this new project that I've been working on with Karl Storbeck here. We've been working on this project together for the last 2 months, and it's an idea we've had since, when did we have it? Last year, November 2024, when we first saw some fireflies when we were out shooting, and we were like, why don't we do a project on fireflies next year? So the project was a lot harder than we initially thought it was going to be, but we had a lot of challenges. We're going to share some of them with you, but we succeeded in our project, I think, more than we thought we would, at a lot more locations than we thought we would. So we're excited to finally share this with you. I think this is the biggest secret I've kept.
I'm actually really proud of you that the fact that you haven't leaked this.
We've been shooting
from the random runners in Newlands Forest.
We've been shooting for 2 months, going out quite a few evenings to try and capture the fireflies. Some were successful, some weren't, and we'll chat about those later. But yeah, big secret I've kept. So yeah, this is our story behind the project. This is a project that's a collaboration between me and Karl. We used all our cameras together. We shared everything. We edited the pictures together. We actually don't know whose pictures are whose at the end of the day. So all the pictures you see were taken by myself and by Karl as a joint collaboration.
Okay, Karl, what are we doing in the woods?
Scouting.
Scouting what?
We're optimistic that there might be fireflies.
Yeah, so we are in Newlands Forest. We think there might be fireflies, so we are here nice and early, and we are looking for some comps with the trees, some of these ferns around here. It's nice and open, so let's see what we get. Apparently they like dead trees, so we found some dead trees. So we're gonna camp out here and see
There's a lot of information online to go on.
Yeah.
Okay, so last year, Karl and I were out shooting seascapes at Kogelbaai. We just shoot sunset, so we'd gone back up to the road, and then we decided to hang around and see if there was any bioluminescence, which there was that evening. So we started shooting the bio, and then while we were shooting the bio, we noticed that there were a few fireflies about. So we managed to actually capture some of those fireflies. Our technique was all over the place for that. It was very much panic, but we managed to get some shots. But that really sparked the idea for this project. We realized that there are fireflies around in the Cape, so we thought that it would be a really cool idea to kind of chase them this year and see what locations we could get with fireflies.
Yeah, I mean, it was from then that we started to do some research about fireflies. And there's a lot of information, but there's also not a lot of information. Some areas you'll look up, you'll say, are there fireflies in this area? And there'll be no information on it whatsoever. Most of the information is actually in the northern hemisphere, where the fireflies behave very differently. They come out in midsummer, whereas yeah, it's at the end of our spring. So it's very temperature dependent, very humidity dependent, very weather dependent, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But there's a big difference between the fireflies in the northern hemisphere and the fireflies that we get here. And one of the biggest differences we noticed is a lot of the fireflies in the northern hemisphere don't actually flash, which is something that our fireflies do. So there's obviously different species, and the way we have to shoot them is completely different. So there were a lot of challenges we had to think about and overcome in order to try and get these images and to try and capture them. And I think from both of us, the biggest challenge was that you only have 20 minutes to 30 minutes maximum every evening, when it's warm enough, when the humidity is right, when there's no wind, when you're in the right location, with all these other factors to actually take the photos. And so it's very, very limiting, and you only get like one shot, maybe 2 photos per evening going out because of this very small window when the fireflies come out. So actually very, very challenging. Sometimes it takes a visit of 2 or 3 times to a place just to know where they're going to be before you can even try and take a photo. So this project, I think, was very challenging for both of us. Near the end, we started to get the hang of it and learning how to predict it, but there was a very steep learning curve in trying to overcome these challenges in this project.
I think just to add to that, I think the first time we really found a nice spot with a high concentration of fireflies, it's kind of just a magical thing to experience. So you're kind of overwhelmed just by the experience and don't know where to point your camera and kind of just chase the fireflies. And we've learned through that actually that's not a good approach. You need to kind of predict where they're going to be, set your camera up, take it slowly, and be okay with just coming away with 1 or 2 shots. But yeah, it's a really magical experience and initially very overwhelming, I think.
Okay, so the idea behind the project was that we could capture multiple locations in the Cape with fireflies at sort of iconic locations, so locations you would identify as being part of the Cape. And obviously we would need to incorporate fireflies into these locations as well. And obviously the fireflies aren't always in the most iconic locations. We're not going to get, fireflies on the beach of Bloberg with Table Mountain in the background. So we had to be very selective about the areas that we looked for, and trying to find information of where fireflies actually were was a real challenge. We knew that Kirstenbosch in previous years had done firefly walks, so we knew that that area was prone to fireflies. We knew they were at Kogelbaai because we'd seen them the year before, so those two were sort of on our list of places we wanted to visit. And then we had heard from a friend of ours, Tyron van der Berg, that there were fireflies in Hout Bay and he had seen them in previous years. So we kind of focused on these 3 key locations, Hout Bay, Newlands, Kirstenbosch area, and Kogelbaai, to give us quite a nice spread over sort of the Cape Peninsula area all the way inland towards the Kogelberg biosphere. We've also heard of some fireflies in Stellenbosch area and in the Helderberg area, and we did investigate that. However, our timing was a bit off and we were a bit late for that, but we've got plans to go there again next year and try and get some pictures in that area as well. So the thing that was quite challenging in the beginning is that the fireflies aren't in all these locations at the same time, which we didn't know at the time when we started shooting. But what got us started was we went to actually go shoot some bioluminescence that was in Hout Bay, and there we saw 2 or 3 fireflies flying around. This was early October, and we knew, okay, it's time, they are starting.
So as Karl mentioned, we've got a friend Tyron who stays in Hout Bay, and he'd previously seen fireflies around the Chapman Peaks area in Hout Bay. So the first night he took us to a little valley where he knew there would be fireflies, and that was where we really saw a lot of them. But one of the things I think that was very challenging is that it was a very woodland area and it was very busy, so finding compositions was very challenging. There were a lot of fireflies, you can get really nice trails, but actually finding a nice photo with a nice comp was challenging. The next night we came out and Kyle was determined to shoot a photo of the Sentinel in the background with fireflies, but that then brought up a whole nother bunch of challenges in case of the lights of Hout Bay being very bright and you want to capture the fireflies against that. So I don't know, that was quite a challenging experience.
Okay, we are here at Chapman's. Where are we going, Tyron?
To shoot the Sentinel.
What project are we working on?
We're Leaf on the Wind.
Project Serenity,
Project Serenity.
which is aka Fireflies. This is night 2. Last night we found the fireflies in there, hundreds of them, but was a very steep learning curve in terms of actually learning how to shoot them. Tonight is game night to try and get the shots. So let's see what happens. But we're going into the woods. We go. So found a nice comp here at Chapman's Peak for Project Serenity, shoot the fireflies. We've seen 2 or 3 popping out already. There's a bit of a breeze, so hopefully as it gets darker more will come out. The trick with this is to actually put the camera in the right spot. So put the 2 cameras out there in front, and we've walked away because we found if you stay by the camera then they don't come near you. Seen about 4 fireflies around here, so let's just see. Oh, there's one there. I don't know if you can see it flashing there in the foreground. So the main trick is now to get these guys in front of the lens, which is not so easy to do. There he goes.
Well, I think
Steep
that
learning
first
curve.
night was our most challenging because our approach to shooting was quite quite interesting.
Quite haphazard.
So when you see the fireflies, there's lots of them, there's hundreds of them around. It's quite difficult to capture on video because it's so dark, and the videos that we've shared with you are sort of the best that we've got. But actually being there and experiencing them, there are literally hundreds of these little flashing lights all around you. And as soon as you set up your camera and point in one direction, they move out of the way and they're not behind you. Or if you're in an area, they kind of move away from you. So to try and get them close to the camera in front of the lens was actually extremely challenging. And when we started with the approach of trying to get them in single 30 to 60 second shots, which we realized very quickly wasn't going to work. So our first attempt, actually, we didn't get any usable photos. I think we got this one photo where we blended a few shots, no composition, no background, just some glowing fireflies. So it was very overwhelming, and we didn't realize at that point as well that we only had this 20 to 30 minute window. So once that was done, the fireflies went to ground and were gone, and we're like, oh, we thought we could shoot all night the fireflies, and that wasn't the case. So yeah, first night was extremely challenging, good learning curve, and we slowly progressed and learned from that. So how many attempts did we attempt in total?
So I've counted, and we went out 12 times in total.
Yeah, so 12 nights we went out, and the reason we only did 12 nights over the 2 months is because the conditions need to be ideal. The temperature needs to be above, what do we say, at least 20.
Yeah, 18 is kind of the cutoff, but
Yeah.
into the 20s is much better.
So we did go out several times where the temperature wasn't warm enough and there were no fireflies. So temperature was very important. The humidity was another important factor. And then the wind is a big factor. And if you know Cape Town, you know that October, November is our windy season. So there were a lot of nights when we would have liked to have gone out, but it just wasn't possible due to the weather. So in those 2 months, we were actually only limited to roughly 12. There were a few more days that we couldn't go for other reasons, but there was probably only about 12 to 15 days in those 2 months that were shootable for the fireflies. So again, another challenge, which made it very hard to get the shots. And of those 12 times we went out, how many times did we actually see fireflies?
It's counted 7 times.
Yeah.
But I think we also had quite a steep learning curve initially, because we went back to Hout Bay on one evening, like 2 nights after we'd seen them in a spot. We went back and there were no fireflies, and we realized, okay, temperature is really a big factor here, because that evening was a lot colder. So we also learned to pick our evenings and not go out every night as we'd initially planned. So something else I just wanted to mention, when you do go out, because you know that they come out like after dark, you go out to a location, you think there are going to be fireflies there, and you kind of wait, and it gets darker, and it gets darker, and there are no fireflies. The conditions are perfect, it's warm, it's humid, there's no wind, and there's no fireflies, and there's no fireflies, and then suddenly you see like one light, and then suddenly they all start switching on. So you really have to be patient in waiting for the timing when they come on. And then they're only active for like 20, 30 minutes, and then they start dying down. So it's really a short window.
So we focused on 3 key areas. We found that doing more than 3, we think we wouldn't have been able to do the areas justice. And the area we focused on were Hout Bay. And then we also focused on Newlands Forest. Funny story of Newlands is we did go there twice and we saw nothing. We were convinced there were no fireflies in Newlands, and then we found a little cell phone video on the internet from 2013 where someone said, I saw some fireflies. So we knew there was potential, and we went back and we were rewarded with, I think, some of our best shots of the fireflies. And then Kogelbaai as well, so iconic with the mountain. And then we had bioluminescence with it as well, which is another added factor. those 3 locations are what we focused on shooting the fireflies in the Cape.
Okay, so just a little bit of background about fireflies. So obviously we did a lot of research on them leading up to this project. So something I didn't know before this is fireflies are actually beetles. And in terms of their life cycle, they live for up to about 2 years, depending on the species. The majority of that time is actually in the larva stage. So they spend months, 2 years in the larva stage. They then go into pupa for a few weeks, and then they hatch as the adult fireflies. And those are only around for about 2 to 3 weeks. So that's also, I think, what made this project so challenging, is the fact that we only had this 2 to 3 week window within the various areas. And as Karl has alluded to, those are not necessarily synchronized between the different areas. So we kind of had to figure out when the fireflies were hatching and peaking in the locations that we chose.
So one of the biggest challenges with shooting the fireflies is that it's extremely dark. And the fireflies do make a bright flash, but because they're flashing and they're moving, it's very hard to predict where they're going to move and what direction they're moving in. So what we ended up doing at the end of the day was setting up our cameras. We had 4 cameras between the 2 of us, and we set them all up in different locations where we thought would make a nice composition, and it looked what we would call firefly-y. That was
a term of the project, Firefly.
A very technical term that we've come up with, and you can sort of see an area looks a bit more firefly, it looks a bit more humid, near some water, some nice foliage, some dead leaves and trees, and quite dense. They like dense bushes, which doesn't make it easy for photography, but we had to try and find compositions that kind of fitted into their habitat. And then we would set up our cameras and we would run them on the intervalometer for about 15 minutes, and then we would move to a second composition and then set it up. So hopefully in the evening we could attempt to try and get about 8 different photos, of which 2 or 3 would have been pointing in a direction where there were no fireflies or just didn't work. So at the end of the day, we'd maybe come away with like 2 to 4 photos from a shoot in that 30-minute window that we had. And then what we did is then we would shoot a foreground image at a low ISO and a long exposure, and then we would use that as a base and then overlay the pictures of the fireflies. So we'd probably get about 20 to 50, 60 photos which contained fireflies, and then we would blend them all together. So the pictures that we're showing you are about 15 minutes to 20 minutes of shooting, and it's all the pictures that we took of the fireflies all blended into a single image. The fireflies are in the location. Obviously you're going to see the same firefly a few times because he's flashing as he's moving. So each dot is not a unique firefly, but each sort of trail is a unique firefly as they flashed around. And sometimes they move faster and sometimes they move slower, and that's why some of them look more streaky and some of them look a bit more round, just depending on the wind and how fast they moved in the images.
So editing. So this was Karl's favorite part about the project, was that we had to figure out how to edit these images. And we found out a process of actually manually blending in all of the firefly trails, but you had to kind of create a mask over all of those that you could blend in with your base image. So the blending of the fireflies into the images was a very time-consuming process. Probably we joke about the fact that the editing probably took longer than the actual shoots. I think that would be fair to say. So the editing was also quite a steep learning process, but we've learned some tricks along the way, I think.
So we began shooting on the 21st of October. This was the first time we thought we had significant fireflies to get decent images from. This is when we started in Hout Bay, and it seemed that they started in this area. We went and looked at Newlands Forest, and we didn't see any in this time period, and we were concerned that there actually weren't going to be any. But what we realized is that there's a difference, and we think the difference for Newlands to Hout Bay was that Newlands is on the shadow side of the mountain, and it's slightly cooler there. So because of this, and we don't know if this is correct at all, but we think that they hatched later than the ones in Hout Bay and at Kogelbaai. So we first shot at Hout Bay, then we went and shot at Kogelbaai. And when we went back to Kogelbaai on 2 occasions, when the temperature was right, the humidity was right, the wind was right, there were no fireflies. So they have a very short period of when there are fireflies. It's between 2 to 3 weeks. And this period was up, and then we went to Newlands and there were lots of fireflies there. So we discovered that Newlands had a slightly later cycle than Hout Bay and Kogelbaai. We also went into the Helderberg area and we discovered that that was a bit earlier, and so we missed those there. So we want to go and do those again next year. But it's very important to think about the areas that you're going to go and shoot in, because it makes a big difference depending on whether it's on the sunset side or in the shadow of the mountain. This will affect when they are visible. And so we shot from the 21st of October till about the 27th of November. So just over a month, for 5 weeks, and that's the window you have for fireflies. So again, this is another limiting factor. You can't just go and shoot them into summer. And we found at this point now the fireflies are done for this year. So we have to wait again another whole year till the middle of October next year before we can go and take more photos of the fireflies. But all in all, I think our project was very successful. We achieved what we wanted to achieve, and I think we got really nice pictures. And for us, the main thing was that we had not seen any photos, nice photos, of fireflies in the Cape. We've only seen cell phone photos, maybe 1 or 2 in the sort of the background, but no sort of really nicely done photos of fireflies taken in well-known Cape-based locations. So this was the key for us in this project, was to try and show the fireflies in areas that are very distinctively Cape Town.